And all radioactive materials have the potential to change your DNA. And this is how we get mutations. So, okay, we've got these rock cuttings that are radioactive. We don't know quite how radioactive they are, but if we take them, everything will be fine. We've decided they're naturally occurring. It's not going to be an issue. It doesn't come out of the ground just as rock cuttings. You have to float it out. And how you float it out, and if we have time, I've got a little video, is you use drilling muds. And the drilling muds are also radioactive, and they mix with the brines down there that are also radioactive. And so these are some pictures from a Chesapeake recycling facility in Pennsylvania. And what you can see, and I don't know how clear that is. Can we kill some of these lights? Because this is an important picture.
All right, stand by.
Okay. What you can see from this is that up come the muds, up come the cuttings, and then they kind of mix them all together, and then they're taking them through these processes. You see that dump truck? Those are the muds that are draining out of the cuttings. And so every piece of cutting that comes up is covered with mud. Okay, is that a problem? Well, yeah, because the muds are radioactive and they're called T-norm, and we'll talk about that later. Actually, one of the other speakers will talk about it. So when these cuttings get to us, they're not just plain rock. They're covered with all of this stuff. Now, what do we know about this stuff? Well, what we know from a little bit of data that we have here in Ohio that was taken by Ohio Department of Health is that the muds themselves are really pretty radioactive. If you look at the first set of columns, kind of in the middle, those numbers are for the radium-228. If you look at the ones further over, those are for the radium-226. And so you kind of grab these numbers and you add them together. Remember, the number is 5. Well, if you take the first one across there, which is a mud, you're at 224 plus either 611 or 663, so you're at 650 and 200, you're at 850. 850 is not 5. And if you add the rest of these down, and you look at the rest of them, we've got a vertical mud, a horizontal mud, another mud. They're all in the 850 plus range. And the production water, which may actually be a mixture with brine, is even higher than that. So you've taken the rock, which if it's a Marcellus is somewhere from 3.4 to 34 picocuries per gram, and you've coated it with this stuff, and it's dried on it, okay? So that means you're not dealing with just plain rock. Okay, so we'll measure it. We'll figure out what we've got, and it's not going to be a problem. We can get a Geiger counter, we can put in equipment at the landfills, and we can check for it. Well, I wish it was that simple. Actually, we have a nephew who did satellite telemetry for rocket launches. I will tell you, rocket science is easier than this stuff is. Because what happens is when you take these real-time measurements of gamma, they don't tell you about the radium that we're worried about. And they don't tell you about it because the radium doesn't give you gamma. The radium gives you alpha and beta. And so a real-time gamma measurement, which you could do in the field, is pretty worthless when it gets to the point of telling you how much radium you got, because you're measuring the wrong thing. So how do we figure out what it really is? Well, we measure the decay chains, and now I see everybody's eyes glazing over. The important thing is we want to know the red ones, okay? The red ones are the uraniums and the radiums. To get that, we have to grab a sample, put it in a jar, seal it up, and wait. And the longer we wait, the better, because what we're going to measure is not the radiums, and not the radons, and not even the plutoniums. We're going to measure the lead and bismuth great-granddaughters and great-great-granddaughters of that radium that we were trying to find. And so we have to hang on to this sample long enough so that you can get something called an ingrowth curve. And so that when you measure that bismuth and that lead, you know that that number can be back calculated, and it'll give you something pretty close to what the real radium number is. Obviously, this is not something that's done quickly. Department of Energy tells us we need at least 21 days to get a real number. 21 days, and then you run it through a gamma spectrometer in a laboratory. That is not a Geiger counter in the field. From this, you can get a real number. And from this, you will know how close to 5 you actually are. But until you go through all of this, you have no idea how close to 5 you actually are. What are we doing with this stuff? We're sending it to landfills. And the thing that's really important is that if it's the spent drilling muds, not the stuff attached to the cuttings, but the rest of the drilling muds, it's called T-norm, and some of the other people will talk about that later. Well, those numbers can be a lot higher than 5. But Ohio says, well, you can blend this. You can mix it with soil and be absolutely fine. But in the process of saying that, they don't tell you anything about whether you have to chemically bind that radium. Because remember, the radium moves with water. So you got a pile of this stuff that you've mixed up with a bunch of dirt, and now you have a little bit of radioactive material mixed with a bunch of not radioactive material, and now you got a lot of radioactive material. And it rains on it, and all the radium moves out. And then you're left with this huge pile that's got all these radioactive metals except for the radium. And the radium has moved out and moved into the leachate at landfill, or however they're gathering the runoff from the pads. Amended House Bill 59, which Terry Lodge will talk about, says that most solids and semi-solids are considered norm, naturally occurring radioactive material. We don't have to test for them. We've got no threshold on their radioactive limits. We don't care. That's 90% of the waste stream, roughly. There's no requirements to track where these wastes go. As a matter of fact, you're not even supposed to report. You're not even supposed to keep records. So it isn't even possible to figure out how much went to landfill XYZ to back out what the loading rate was, because they deliberately didn't keep the records you needed to be able to answer that question. And now they're assigning beneficial use, and we'll talk about that more. It can be used for landfill caps, surface repairs, and even as part of the final cap, which is what the story is on the old landfill on Elm Creek, which got us all here tonight. Okay, this stuff is way higher than 5. Are our landfills low-level radioactive waste landfills? And the answer is no, they are not. Well, how do I know that? Well, because I was on the group that picked where we were going to put one in 1992. And I will tell you that when Truman Bennett and I sat there and made the list, none of these landfills fall in those locations. There are some excellent reports that are on the web at OSU Extension that talk about what you would do to build a low-level radioactive waste. And I suggest that you read those so that you understand how these materials should be managed. Okay, what if we call it beneficial use? If I had a composting facility, and my research partner, Dr. Ann Christie, is the biological engineer in our department, I would think long and hard about taking this stuff. From what I understand, they are composting the hydrocarbons. But there isn't anything in this process, as I understand it, and I may be wrong, that deals with the heavy and radioactive metals that are in it. And remember, they don't even have to measure it, so they don't know what they're getting. We know that they're coming from Chesapeake in Pennsylvania covered with drilling muds. There's no record anywhere in Ohio that they're going to wash them. So we're expecting them coming with drilling muds. So these mixed rock cuttings and drilling muds have a greater chance of contaminating the composting site and the stormwater retention system than they do if we even get them over to the landfill along the creek. What's going to get contaminated first? It's going to be the site where they're going to do the reclamation. And from what I know, working with Ann now for these last almost 20 years, is that heavy and radioactive metals can affect the microbes in ways that we have no idea what they're going to do. So if I owned this facility, I'd be very concerned and do a whole lot of testing before I took it, because I wouldn't want to destroy my investment for the facility, and I wouldn't want to wipe out my microbes. Okay, so that's Ohio's story. What is everybody else doing? Oh, they're heading the other direction. If you talk to the folks in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in West Virginia, they are all putting these solids and semi-solid wastes into monofills at landfills. And they are burying them very deep. They have different levels that they'll allow to come in. If you're above that level, you can't bring it there. You have to take it someplace else, like Utah or Washington State or Ohio. In West Virginia, they collect the leachate under this special cell 2 times a month and check for the radium levels. And they fully intend to monitor these sites forever. They are turning these sites into low-level radioactive waste landfills. Their concern is 200 years from now, somebody putting a housing development on top of it, building basements, and everybody dying from the radon gas. So they're being responsible. Their liquids, most of them, are coming to Ohio. Now, if you were going to use the number that Michigan uses, of 50 picocuries per liter, where would you be, and how long would it be till that was safe? Okay, half-lives, 50 to 25, 25 to 12 and a half, 12 and a half to 6.25, 6.25 down a little bit to 5. That radium-226, 5,000 years. If you go back 5,000 years, they were building the pyramids. The uranium, 4.48 million years for half-life. Oh, back to the beginning of the universe. And the thorium, we don't have a measurement that big, because the thorium's half-life is actually longer than since the Big Bang. So we are talking about permanent sacrifice zones. Drillers tell us that Ohio is the most regulatory friendly state that we've operated in, and we are. Now, there are a team of 11 of us that are writing a paper for the Ohio Journal of Science. That's 5 universities and the private sector, scientists, engineers, registered sanitarians, public health people, a whole variety of folks working on this. I am coordinating it. It was supposed to be done, but we keep finding more stuff. God knows when I'm going to finish. We hope this spring. We're looking at the Utica and Marcellus shales in Ohio. What do we know? What don't we know? But also, what are the environmental and legal issues? The public health considerations, the socioeconomic considerations. And once it's done, it will go online first, and that is the link, I'm hoping, this spring. This is our contacts. If you have questions about the basic geology part, get me. If you're interested in the engineering part about microbes or wastewater treatment plants or what happens in landfills, you want to talk to Ann Christie. If you, well, you can talk to me and you can talk to Linda Aller as well. Linda is a registered sanitarian and she is the